London, the 1920s, a city shrouded in cold smoke and quiet determination. Science moved in hushed laboratories, seeking answers in a microscopic world unseen. Alexander Fleming, a bacteriologist of keen eye, worked amidst the chaos of his cluttered St. Mary's workspace, a familiar battlefield against unseen enemies. He returned from a brief holiday, the summer's warmth fading into London's damp autumn. His Petri dishes awaited his inspection, some forgotten. One dish, intended for Staphylococcus, was left carelessly uncovered near an open window. A small oversight, a cosmic accident waiting to happen. A faint, bluish-green mold had begun to bloom upon the agar surface. Not contamination, but something entirely different taking hold. Fleming noticed something extraordinary surrounding the invading fungus. The bacteria he cultivated were dissolving, vanishing near the intruder. He isolated the contaminant, identifying it as Penicillium notatum, a mold previously dismissed as mundane biological debris. He named the active substance it secreted penicillin, a potent agent capable of stopping bacterial growth without harming human cells nearby. The potential was staggering. A natural weapon against the deadly infections that ravaged hospitals and homes across the world. Yet, the initial excitement tempered into frustration. Fleming struggled to isolate and purify the miraculous compound in sufficient quantities. He published his findings, a quiet revelation in the scientific journals. The world, preoccupied, did not immediately grasp the magnitude of this discovery. Years passed. Penicillin remained a laboratory curiosity, powerful in a shallow dish, elusive in a complex biological system. Then the shadows lengthened. Europe plunged once more into the brutal theater of global conflict. Wounds became death sentences. In Oxford, a different team began their focused work. Howard Florey and Ernst driven by the looming necessity of war. They resurrected Fleming's forgotten papers, seeing not history, but urgent life-saving opportunity waiting to be seized. Chain, the brilliant biochemist, painstakingly developed the chemical methods required to extract and stabilize the fragile mold essence. Florey, the determined administrator, pushed the laboratory toward tangible, scalable results. The race against time had officially begun. Their early trials were fraught with peril and minuscule yields. A single drop contained the potential to rewrite the rules of medicine. They needed more, far more than their modest laboratory could produce from its small flasks of mold culture. The necessity of wartime secrecy forced them to look beyond Britain's beleaguered shores for industrial capacity. America beckoned. Florey traveled across the Atlantic, carrying the precious samples of fragile hope encapsulated in glass vials against potential catastrophe. He found a receptive ear in American pharmaceutical laboratories, where industrial scale was routine, and the need was desperately clear. The collaboration began. Scientists worked feverishly, adapting fermentation techniques to grow the mold in deep tanks, not shallow dishes. They bred the mold differently, finding hardier strains that yielded far greater concentrations of the active pharmaceutical ingredient. The production effort was a monumental feat of wartime industry, transforming a biological accident into a reliable, mass-produced drug. Early clinical trials on infected patients were nothing short of miraculous. Men dying from sepsis suddenly began to rally and recover. The tide began to turn on the battlefield, not just through bullets and bombs, but through tiny, invisible molecules fighting infection within. Penicillin began reaching the field hospitals. It saved limbs, averted amputations, and pulled countless young lives back from the brink. The secret was out. The wonder drug, born in London's neglect, delivered by American industry, became the arsenal against disease. Innocuous infections, once a certain death warrant, now yielded swiftly to a course of this newly available revolutionary treatment. The post-war world emerged fundamentally changed. The demographic threat of infectious disease had been decisively, though temporarily, broken. Fleming, Florey, and Chain shared the Nobel Prize, acknowledging the three essential pillars: observation, chemistry, and engineering scale. Penicillin heralded the true dawn of the antibiotic age, and medicine finally had the power to routinely conquer bacterial scourges: pneumonia, scarlet fever, syphilis. The old killers retreated into the shadows, humbled by refined mold extract. Hospitals transformed. Surgeries became safer. Childbirth, once hazardous, gained a new layer of protection against internal invasion. The drug itself required careful use. Even in its early days, whispers began about bacteria learning to adapt to the new chemical pressure. But for a generation, it felt like magic, a tangible expression of scientific mastery over nature's most relentless microscopic forces. LP, the production lines, kept humming, supplying the globe. Penicillin flowed from factories into clinics, becoming a standardized element of care. It was a powerful reminder that great discoveries often lie dormant, waiting for the right moment of focused attention to be recognized. The quiet work of a single scientist in a cluttered room had reshaped human longevity and population growth across the planet. The story of its creation became a classic narrative, the genius of accident nurtured by relentless scientific pursuit under pressure. From one forgotten plate, an industry was born, a global supply chain dedicated to manufacturing invisible cellular warfare. Soldiers returned home, carrying not just scars of war, but the proof of this medical marvel safeguarding their lives against sepsis. The very concept of incurable infection began to recede from common public fear, replaced by optimism in scientific progress. Penicillin showed humanity its capacity for rapid innovation when unified by a common existential threat requiring immediate solutions. It served as the foundational model for every antibiotic synthesized and developed in the decades that followed its initial triumphant introduction. But the victory was never absolute. Bacteria are relentless students, and evolution their oldest, most patient teacher. The very success of penicillin began to place an enormous selective pressure on microbial populations everywhere it was used. Fleming himself warned of the dangers of misuse, cautioning against prematurely stopping treatment, ensuring the drug's full potency was delivered. His warning was a prophetic undertone beneath the celebrations, a necessary counterpoint to the sheer exhilaration of success. Today, penicillin remains in use, though often modified, adapted, and reinforced against evolved threats that have learned its chemistry. We stand on the shoulders of those initial accidental observations made in a poorly managed London laboratory 60 years prior. The antibiotic era defines modern surgery, transplantation, and critical care, a foundation built on mold juice. It is a testament to the patience required to look closely at what everyone else dismisses as failure or simple contamination. The legacy continues to challenge us. Finding new defenses against resistance requires the same fundamental curiosity that Fleming possessed. Imagine the millions of breaths drawn because of that fuzzy growth blooming under the London autumn light. The power was always there, latent in the natural world, waiting for a mind prepared to see the invisible battlefield. The silent war against the unseen realm continues, armed with the lessons learned from that first miraculous substance. The faint green mold seeded an empire of healing, a quiet revolution that redefined human vulnerability and resilience. And still, the greatest tool remains the simple, profound act of watching what happens when you look away for just a moment too long.